Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Anderson, and welcome to The Road Rarely Taken, how ordinary people got out of their own way, and you can too. Really excited today. It's kind of an honor for me, actually, to interview one of my own past heroes, and I guess current heroes as well, Fiona Harrold, who's I think it's very legitimate to say is a pioneer in the coaching world, certainly in Europe and maybe beyond. As I said, it's based in the Europe piece from what you put on your website. A little bit about Fiona's past. She grew up during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and her father was one of her biggest role models, who started out as a door-to-door salesperson, became very successful with his company. And one of the things that she shared that they learned was that seeing firsthand that it doesn't matter what happens to you ever, it's always your interpretation or assessment that sets you up for the life that you have. At 20, she moved to London, became very involved politically, and at some point that grew too toxic for her, at which point she reinvented herself, started a massage school, and what later became the London College of Massage, and then moved into what she at the time called self-esteem coaching, set herself up in the elegant Basil Street Hotel in London tonight, which for those of you less familiar with London is certainly one of its most exclusive parts. And since then, that must have been, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, Fiona?
We're definitely heading that direction.
Yeah. Has gone on to coach all kinds of lords, ladies, celebrities, politicians, public figures, CEOs, has written numerous bestsellers. I've got two of them in front of me, so that for those of you that are watching this on the video, certainly one of her later books was The 7 Rules of Success, but the book that, I know this sounds like a cliche, but it truly absolutely changed my life, was this book called Be Your Own Life Coach. And I wish for those of you who are listening could just see this. It's one of those stereotypically battered books, ripped on the back. It's deeply yellowed in color, got tons of writing in it. Anyway, it's just, I can't tell you how many times I've read that book. Anyway, Fiona, really excited to have a chance to talk to you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So always like to kick off with one pre-prepared question, and then just have a conversation. But the question is around, obviously, our focus is getting out of your own way. So what's perhaps been the one thing that's helped you the most in terms of overcoming obstacles in your life?
I think that if I had to identify one thing, Matt, it's really having someone outside of myself, who almost gives me permission to expand my sense of myself and my sense of what's possible. So it's absolutely having an outsider who acts like a witness and who scopes out these wider possibilities for you. So I would say that's the thing that always works for me, is having that figure, that person. I guess truly it's because that's what I had in my dad. You mentioned my dad, who was the self-improvement fanatic. And I think I really got that experience from my dad, in the early days. And
then I know you referenced a mentor when you got into the massage and self-development world. And then who has that person been since? I mean, I'm assuming that person has varied.
Absolutely. I think you got to vary it as you grow yourself and as you look for something else. But I always have someone in my life who holds out that bigger vision for me and who feeds my sense of what's possible. So, I've always had people throughout my life. My dad was my first mentor, my first coach, if you like, because for him, he saw me as someone who could achieve anything that I wanted to achieve if I put my mind to it. So that's so crucial for everyone to have that sense of themselves, what's possible, and then to have that support, that cheerleader. Now I probably have one or two people that I use. I have a spiritual teacher who was a great influence for me and who just has a somewhat different perspective than a regular coach or mentor. I'm in Sedona.
All right, nice.
That I work with, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was curious. How do you find these people or seek them out?
Well, truthfully, I would use a mentor. Nowadays, I would use a mentor who clearly had a track record for something that I wanted to emulate. My shaman in Sedona, I came across when I was just visiting Sedona, and I just wanted to try out that different experience of working with a shaman.
Nice.
So I met her there, and then I've just since continued to work with her for about 3-4 years since then by Skype.
Nice. So one of the things I want to ask about fairly early on in our time together, I know in your 7 Rules book, you talk about self-belief. And what I want to ask, I suppose, in a way is, well, I'll just be honest, is like, because I've done so many exercises from so many books over the years about identifying the beliefs that I want, but instilling them, I've found to be a much harder task, certainly than I think many books have the opportunity to reflect. And so I can see that's why the benefit of having someone to talk to on a consistent basis to kind of keep that top of mind. But I want to go a bit deeper on that, or hear more from you, because I'm sure you've expanded your learning and philosophy since then, or maybe not on that area, I don't know. But how have you helped people that you've coached, I suppose, change beliefs? Because I just found that I don't know, that most of the time it's much harder said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the key is to ground the new belief in reality. Look, at the end of the day, you're selling yourself. So the most important thing you can do is to sell yourself to yourself. You know, my dad was this tremendous salesman. Mm-hmm. Be the top selling salesman in the country in Northern Ireland year after year after year. And his golden rule about selling was, he used to say to me, now Fiona, don't try and sell anything until you're sold on it yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think if you apply that to yourself, Matt, that's got to be the thing. I think you've got to sell yourself to yourself with regard to whatever it is you want to do. So, you know, just affirming that you're good enough, affirming that you can do it isn't enough. Just positive thinking. What I think you've got to get to is what's really underlying, the real foundation. So what I like to do with people is I like to do what I like to connect you to your source of credibility. Because if you're going to go out there and position yourself in the marketplace to be an expert, an authority on anything under the sun, you have got to be able to feel that you're standing on solid ground. You have got to be the one who's convinced on that first and foremost. Mm-hmm. So I tend to get to what there actually is in your life, in your personal experience, in particular, that really befits you to do what you're doing. That, I think, is the really crucial thing.
Interesting. So, I mean, is there a story that comes to mind of someone you've coached where you can talk us through that process of how that worked?
I coach all my clients on this because, you know, when people come to me, it's because they want to step out of their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. It's because they want something bigger than they've already got. So they want me to help them get that thing. So they have to expand how they see themselves. So honestly, the best example I can give you, Matt, is myself.
Sure.
Because I got a 3-book deal to do Be Your Own Life Coach, which 2000 and 2 others. And I'm very, very good at getting myself in the press and getting exposure and all of that. So I had a half-page feature in the Daily Telegraph. It's a big quality newspaper in the UK. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, when that came out, I pretty much had a 3-book deal. You know, I had publishers calling me saying, hey, can you write? Yes. Can you write fast? Yes. So before I knew it, by the end of the week, I had a 3-book deal and a 5-figure advance. So then I came to sit down and write the darn book. And I really had an identity crisis. I thought, gee, you know, who am I to do this? Mm-hmm. I have really overstepped the mark this time. Yeah. I don't have a training in counseling or therapy or anything like that. So honestly, I considered handing back the advance and just stopping the whole thing. And instead, I sat down and I sold myself to myself. I took an inventory of everything in my life that actually positioned me to write this book. Mm-hmm. So I could justify it to myself. And by the end of that, I was fired up and I felt completely qualified. Because the thing is, you've got to feel qualified to do the thing that you do. Mm-hmm. You've got to give yourself permission to do it. So that really worked for me. I was able to do the book and just feel enthusiastic about doing it.
So I don't know if this is an awkward area to go to, but I mean, so my experience has been with, I mean, I felt like I had the best referral content on the planet. So
Sure.
I in that area, it took me time to get there. I think what my frustration, in other words, the reason why I'm talking about getting out of your own way was I found that giving people the recipe, obviously only went so far in terms of helping other people. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, even if you can get to that point where you absolutely know what we're talking about, you can help people, and that the content's outstanding, it's it's helping other people then go out and do the work. And that was the bit that, well, I think is a lot harder to do, obviously, because you can't control what other people do. So how, I don't know, how do you, and actually, I'm guessing you might probably disagree with me on this one, but I want to ask, how do you accept that or come to terms? Let's say you speak to an audience of 1,000 people. I mean, at least my experience is that, an awful lot of those people aren't going to do anything after the presentation. And some, might be somewhat motivated but it's going to be a tiny percentage that actually go out there and do the work, or, you know how it is, or some will do it for a little while, but fall off the wagon, and we're going to not get the results. So
Yeah.
I think that was perhaps, I don't know if that's one of the things that upset me. I just sort of wanted to see more people follow through. But can you sort of talk about how you come to terms with that, I suppose?
Well, first of all, I don't feel that I'm responsible for other people's results.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't get attached to whether people implement and follow through. Of course, I encourage people and I want them to succeed. But at the end of the day, it's down to people whether they're going to take the action or not. Whenever I offer a program, I always offer ongoing support, because I know that's key.
Yeah.
Not enough. It doesn't matter how great that workshop is,
right.
that talk is that you do. And I'm very honest with people. The crucial thing is having the support, mm-hmm. because you are encouraging people to do something different, to do something a little bit scary, to step out of a comfort zone. And the fact is, they're more likely to succeed if they have that support around them. So I always offer that ongoing support. It makes all the difference in the world. Does that help? That's the sort of thing you're talking about.
It does help. It helps a lot, yes. No question.
So here's the other thing, Matt. Some people, it's so important for people to do the right thing for them. Because if you're chasing something that doesn't fit with your talents and your skills, you're just never going to be that good at it. Right. It's a bit mm-hmm. the X factor. When someone comes on and Simon Cowell says, look, how can I say this? This isn't really your thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You should stick with the gymnastics or whatever it is. That's mm-hmm. your thing over there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to help people choose the right dream, the right path for them, that just really supports their skills, plays to their strengths.
Right. What about the subconscious mind? Because that's an area that I feel like I've read about a lot more of in the last, probably since I've read your books, really. And I'm just curious, do you do a lot of work in that area now in terms of helping people sort of more deliberately recondition their thinking? I do know in your book you reference visualizing, which again, we're talking about 14 years ago, at least the 7 Rules book. Do you talk about that topic now, or do you address that more now in terms of sort of now people have learned so much more about the brain?
Do you know, at the end of the day, what I'm really looking to do when I work with people privately, I guess I'm really wanting to unpick the programming that they've still got that holds them back.
Yep.
Because, the absolute truth is, it's really people, as you know, Matt, as you're talking about, it's really people having obstacles in their own way. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the time I see my job as spotting those obstacles, that old programming, and it's from a dad or it's from a mum mm-hmm. or some significant figures that were growing up, and they're still so attached to living life a particular way, to being a particular way. And usually they've come to the end of the road of living with that influence, that impact, and they can really see how they can't go beyond where they're at until they clear that. So, an example is someone I'm working with at the moment who's been super duper successful in her working life, and has had about 5 months of just not being able to find work. So what she's come to me for is that she needs to position herself in the marketplace to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem. She was brought up by a father who never wanted her to make a fuss, because she was brilliant at school, did extremely well, but just didn't want her to be that person who, I guess you could say, I mean, we're talking Britain, Great Britain, UK, was too big for her boots.
Yeah, sure.
Now what I've got to do is undermine that programming so that she feels freed up to position herself in a really impactful way on LinkedIn and reach out to people and just not be so falsely modest about her strengths.
Mm-hmm,
If
mm-hmm.
she continues, she's probably going to struggle to get work, quite frankly.
Right.
And the sad thing is she can see people who are not as good as she is soaring ahead.
Yeah.
Because they don't have that block on positioning themselves. She sees it as promoting themselves, self-promotion.
Yeah.
But the fact is, if she continues to think like that, she's going to go broke.
Right. What about social conditioning, though? Because that's another area that I don't know. Again, I know. God, I'm supposed to know his name. The Big Leap. That book.
Yes, it's Hendricks. Gay Hendricks.
Yeah, he's right. Gay Hendricks. Right.
Yeah.
So that one was. I read that over a year and a half ago, but I read it 2 or 3 times, and that was kind of an interesting way. He talks about the thermostats we have with our moods, that we're used to feeling a certain way, but also socially. Yeah. And that's not just his book. In fact, I interviewed a Stanford economist this year who wrote an excellent book called The Human Network. He basically argued that, almost every person on the planet lives in these tiny little bubbles, and it virtually, and they, firstly, they imitate those people's behaviors and language and food tastes and all the rest of it. But then, of course, it also, obviously impacts then their biases, but then also about what they think they're capable of accomplishing, and then also who they know. So it's a fascinating interview, but in some ways very similar, coming at from a wildly different angle than Gay Hendricks' piece. But how do you help people with that? Because it's interesting. I notice in your bio on the website, you talk about your very humble origins and how that almost led to an attitude. And of course, now I've moved it, so I can't see it for a second. But of why not do something big?
Yes.
But that certainly isn't how most people think.
Yeah.
What recommendations do you have to people listening on ways to break past that? Because I just think that's another area where we're mostly unwittingly living our lives with limits.
Absolutely. Well, it's no coincidence in all the recovery movements across the world, when you're making a major shift in your life, one of their guidelines is lose your phone. You've got to change your friends. The best rehab program in the world is unlikely to work if you go straight back to the old environment, because you're going to be straight back into those influences and that peer pressure and those old patterns and places. Disastrous. So I totally agree with you. The people, the company that you keep is absolutely crucial. I mean, that's why sometimes, you've got maybe one person in your life, and it could be that coach that you're paying to give you some light, to provide some light, to expand your horizons as to what you think is possible, and who's pulling you forward and perhaps helping pull you out of a place as well. One of the things that I do with people, because I'm really helping coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs position themselves to stand out so they attract business to them. So one of the things I do is I help them create a great talk that is like their passport, gets them into places. So they're not having to push the door and try and sell something, but they're offering a gift. They're offering this free 30, 45, 60-minute talk. And it's just a way of getting into places and having doors open where they don't have connections.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely crucial, the people that you surround yourself with.
Okay, so I'm hearing that a lot. I noticed that is it fair to say then that you don't buy in too wholeheartedly to the need to sort of, spend too much time studying or deliberately working on your subconscious brain as far as an action item? Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm probably listening most of the time when I'm, not working. I've always got something going on in the background that is just absolutely positive and inspiring. So I'm conditioning my mind constantly, absolutely. So I definitely am a big believer in that. If I'm in the car, the minute I get in, I've got something. I'm loving Les Brown at the moment. I'm going back to basics.
I do hear you on that one.
People like that.
I go through these phases too. I'll read absurd amounts of books, and then I'll have a phase where I'm thinking, no, I don't need to read more books. I need to read some of these classics like yours, frankly, over and over again, because most of what one is needed is in there anyway. It's funny going back to the originals. So I want to talk about self-worth as well, because I know that's another topic I know you're extremely well tuned into as an obstacle area. Are there other things that people can do there in terms of, because I just think it's funny, often when I'm with groups, we could talk for 2 hours in a group, and it seems like underlying every whether the challenge is in business or personal, underneath it all, it seems to come down to some kind of worthiness piece, that they don't deserve love or intimacy or multi-million pound or dollar business. I mean, whatever it is that they're aspiring to, or great health and fitness. Obviously there's more to it than who we spend time with. What other things do you find are really helpful for people to sort of feel better about who they are?
Absolutely. No, that's a great question, Matt. I think there's two things that I would do. One is, again, getting to the core, the cause of what would get in their way, what would stop them feeling, if you like, innocent. What stops them feeling really good about themselves? What are they blaming themselves for? Honestly, there's nobody harder on ourselves. There's no worse critic or harder judge than ourselves. So it's getting to what it is we're beating ourselves up about, or beating up on ourselves, as they say in the States, where you are. But it's what we need to forgive ourselves for, what we need to let go of that we're holding against ourselves. So it's that. But then the second thing I would do is I would get people to go beyond themselves, because that's all about, that self-absorption, which needs to be handled. It is all self-absorption. But then what you've got to do is you've got to get beyond that. You've got to get beyond that to a place of service, so that you take the focus off yourself and the focus exclusively on what you're here to do, how you can help, how you can serve. So I encourage people to align to that, if you like, energy, that intention, that motivation of service. And honestly, it's a blessed relief, because it takes you immediately away from all of that, oh, can I do this? Am I worthy? Am I good enough? All that stuff. It just takes you immediately to a whole different feeling, a whole different energy. I get people to connect stronger, to align stronger to that sense of whether it's God, whether it's the divine, whether it's spirit source, whatever concept or phrase people have for this higher power. It's very important, I think, to feel that you're connecting stronger to your higher self, to that higher power, so that it's not all down to you. Otherwise, frankly, you drive yourself crazy. So you've got this place to go to where you ask for help. You ask how you can best serve, how you can best be of service. You ask for help to be shown. And it just makes an enormous difference. When people are really aligned with that intention of service, their life can change very fast. And life can become much easier, much less of a struggle.
Yeah, no, that's really that's really insightful, great feedback. One thing I'm itching to ask you is, and I don't know if it's something we write in books or not. I'm inclined to think we don't, but I'll cut to the chase rather than tell the whole story. Do you think that most people that are high achievers are people that have been through a lot of pain and been to a lot of dark places? And if that is the case, what recommendations do you have for people that are from, I suppose, more comfortable middle class backgrounds that, okay, fine, I'm sure there was some dysfunction in the family, but nothing particularly traumatic? Because that was what I went into this work hoping to find, really. And I haven't really found it, because most of the high achievers I talk to, end up not surprising me when they talk about, some of the really difficult things that they've experienced growing up.
Yeah.
So do you think, or what, do you think that people from reasonably comfortable places can still go big places? And if so, what's the piece that most people don't seem to grasp? Yeah.
I think what you're touching on there, Matt, is motivation. So I think what you're saying is sometimes if people have a very comfortable life, then maybe they don't have that huge hunger or motivation or drive to make money and really succeed in that obvious way. And I guess, and then there is a lot of truth to that. Very often you get, a parent is uber successful and their kids just don't have that drive that they had because life is just much more comfortable.
Yeah.
I think honestly it comes down to motivation. It comes down to finding the thing that you care about, finding the thing that matters most to you. And it may not be money. Money's just a really obvious way of spotting motivation, You didn't grow up with money, times were hard, so you had that very obvious drive to make money, which is absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But if that's not your driver, then you probably need to find something that is, in order to really, stretch yourself to achieve things.
Because that's what I used to tell myself when I was coaching people that weren't following through that much. And I don't know, I guess I'm not convinced that, I guess we can, I'm more inclined to defer to what you're saying. I just feel like there's something else here that, and maybe it's just that people that grow up with, or some people that have been through a lot of pain are just more driven to prove a point, to make more of themselves. Because of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
also, the fact is some people may not be as driven as, frankly, people like you and me and the sort of people that we attract in our clients, the people who come to our workshops and masterminds. That's a simple fact. Yeah, that's a fact for sure. I find it a little bit strange, maybe you do too, not to be uber driven to make the most of life and to make the most of oneself, but not everyone is driven in that way to make the most of every day and everything.
And that comes down to, I know you've talked about perseverance as well. It's weird. I just feel like that, I don't know, when I'm at my best presenting to a group, you see people and you can just feel their desire to want more out of life. And maybe, again, ultimately, I'm just repeating what you're saying, and that perhaps at some point perhaps that drive doesn't last that long. But I just feel that most people do want more, but that they give up more quickly because, again, they don't really believe that they deserve to do that much better, or that that's what was expected. More has never been expected of them. And so that's why I'm so fascinated in trying to somehow dig up, are there other things that people can do more consistently to get them in a better direction? For example, I don't know if you've read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, and I'm sure you've read about like the incremental gains philosophy. I think that's really brilliant, the way he's applied it to sort of these 1% habits, that if you do small things consistently that help you become the person you want to become. I've been doing it all this year anyway. Some of those results are really impressive when you do them for a year. 2-3 months, you're thinking, well, that wasn't much use. But if, so in other words, if people can persist on some of those things, I think there's a lot of power. And so to me, I think that's, for me, that was ignorance. Like I didn't know that if you keep doing these small things over and over again, eventually you'll get there. I don't know. I'm just sort of fishing to sort of wonder what else can be helpful.
Look, I've been thinking about that recently, truly, because I keep seeing these girls who are pregnant at 18 and thinking, oh my God, they're 27 and they've got 3 kids. And I'm thinking, how could that happen? because back in the day, in my day, that would have been, I would have seen that, my family would have seen that as just the most disastrous thing that could have happened to me at 18, because there I was with my whole future, my whole life in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only assume that these girls just don't have that vision to look forward to
mm-hmm.
invest in that sense of what's possible for them and this wide open future that's ahead. So I think that's a large part to do with it, Matt, really having that enthusiasm for your future, that motivation. I grew up in Northern Ireland. At 12, I looked around me and literally people were killing themselves either side of me.
Uh-huh.
And it was the worst of the troubles. So in some ways, that was a fabulous place to grow up if you wanted to have a desire to leave and go somewhere bigger.
Yes.
I had a huge motivation. When I was 12, I remember the moment I was standing on a path and I just stood and I thought, gee whiz, this is not for me. I'm not going to live here. And I just remember creating a plan, a step-by-step plan. My passport back in the day was to get a university degree, and that would be my passport into the world. So, but at the same time, I had my dad who was encouraging that every step of the way. Yes, of course it's possible. Of course you can do that. Da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. So if people are surrounded by others who are living life in a particular way in the same place, da-da-da-da-da, and that's all they envisage, it could be very difficult for them to really have a sense of themselves living a different type of life.
Well, I know we've only got a few minutes left. I'm curious about what your professional path, because I suppose I lost track for a while. I became so embroiled on my own once you'd helped get me on a great trajectory. So I know at one point you had a big coaching company where lots of people come to site and hire people from different specialties. So what have you what have you been working on in the last 10 years or so? And also, where are you going next?
Oh, look at you with your questions. Gosh, I've had a really interesting 10 years, because the book came out in 2000, Beer and Life Coach. Thankfully, that was a great bestseller and all that was great. Truthfully, I got really complacent with success.
Yeah.
I got really comfortable with success, and I took a couple of years out, and because I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue in this vein or do something completely different. So I took about 3 years out, and I've just been coming back and finding a way to enjoy what I do and grow as a person that isn't as full on as I used to live and work. I used to be very, very full on in the way I lived and worked. And now I'm trying to strike a balance where I actually enjoy my life and enjoy myself as well as do good work. I feel like I've had a couple of years, I guess just a couple of years out where I just haven't been out there in the way that I have been previously. Next year, I feel like I'm coming back. That's what it feels like. So my theme for next year is communicate. So I'm going to do a lot more videos. I'm going to do a podcast. I've got new mastermind groups I'm starting in January. So I feel just, good. So I lived in Spain for a couple of years. I'm back in the UK now. So it just feels like I'm in the best place now to regroup. And I've got a couple of books I'm going to do next year as well.
Nice. Is there a new theme or emphasis to the work you're doing? Is it more?
Yeah, definitely. Because you've got to keep growing, Matt, as you well know. My gosh, one can't be doing the same old. So for me, I think the big switch for me has been to align with that notion of service. So that's changed a lot in my life. It's changed how I work, and it's just changed everything, really. I used to be extremely driven by, the figures and money and all of that, and it makes for a very stressful life. It makes for a very pushy life. So I think that is a change that a lot of people are ready to make that connection to service, to a higher motivation, a higher intention.
Yeah.
It's a very, very practical thing to do as well. So I'm bringing that much more into work that I do with people. Yeah, because I've seen the change in my own life with that.
Yeah. And I must say again, no one, but I don't often get called an expert in anything else other than what I used to work on. But I do, and when I look back at your books, you were very much I think on the cutting edge of seeing trends in society that other people weren't writing about. That frankly, like downsizing or downshifting, and it's funny because, I mean, frankly, now that still is a topic I don't hear all that much about, even though, I'm sure it exists, but just that notion that, we're still, again, especially with all the political leadership, so-called leadership we have, it's still so focused on money and material possessions. So I'm glad that you're going to be a voice, kind of speaking loudly about that. It may be a side topic, but it's something that somebody raised with me over coffee a couple of weeks ago. And then it's funny, I never noticed it in your book, but you talked about having an astrological chart read. And I'd never noticed it before because I'd probably never heard of it. So it's so funny how when you reread things, you're like, I don't remember that bit at all. I also didn't notice, well, I did notice in Beer and Life Coach, I think it may even be on the very first page, because I had this on my fridge at one point, about how we're our own biggest obstacles. Maybe it's not on the first page, but it's right very early on. And I remember that striking me as such an odd thing to say, because I didn't know much of anything at that time. But what's funny is I noticed it's also right at the beginning of your 7 Rules book as well. You make a very similar statement. But astrological charts, I don't know, can you say what your experience has been with it? Because I've been sort of mulling it. And also, is it helpful in any way to overcoming obstacles?
I mean, I think that self-awareness is crucial, self-knowledge. So anything like that throws some insight into your inner workings and your thinking, your patterns, or your behavior is useful. It's not something that I've done any specific training on. I just enjoy every couple of years, I'll go and have my chart read and just see what they have to say. But I think that anything like that it sheds light on your motivation, it helps you expand your thinking about yourself and your understanding, of course, is useful.
And anything different in terms of helping people find that extra motivation? This is a perfect time to ask the question with a new decade around the corner. Beyond, I suppose, just kind of initially dreaming about what we would most like to do, be, and have, are there other things that you found helpful? Or one thing I've always loved about your books is some of the questions or exercises you ask. I mean, there's one I've used off and on over the years about, what are 5 things that you'd always wanted to be, do, and have, and then 3 reasons why not. I mean, that's still embedded in my brain because I found that an invaluable way to identify limiting beliefs. But are there questions that you particularly like around helping people, I guess, refine motivation and drive?
Well, there's that $1 million question, Matt. What would you do if time and money was no obstacle?
Mm-hmm.
Really to get to the core of what makes you feel alive. What would you do more of? What are those natural talents and skills? What are you really good at that comes easy to you? That people envy you for, that other people struggle with. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think having a life that really works is just about knowing what those innate strengths and talents are that you have. Mm-hmm. People very much miss those or underplay them or undermine them because it comes easy to you. It's so easy for you to just take them for granted, pay no attention to them. The stuff that people value and what I can do for them is stuff that's so easy for me. I hardly not even pay attention to it. Stuff like writing, maybe rewriting somebody's website for them or just giving them a great marketing message. That's stuff that people really struggle with.
I'm sure hanging out with you.
No, go on.
I said, but hanging out with your father probably helped with some of that in terms of early hardwiring, right?
Yeah. I always loved to read. I've always been a big reader. Yeah. I've always loved to write. Writing's my thing. It really is my thing. It's one of my things. Excellent. And everybody has those things. Everybody has those things.
Yeah. Well, I know we're out of time here. So Fiona, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. What are some things that you would like to let listeners know about that? I know you alluded to a couple of things. Are there 1 or 2 things in particular that you want to draw people's attention to check out or get more information?
I mean, probably the best thing to do is just to reach out on social media and LinkedIn, Facebook, or shoot me an email if I can help with anything, Fiona@FionaHarrold.com. I'm going to have some lovely new free material coming up in the next few weeks on Design Your Decade.
Oh,
so, absolutely. So make sure that you keep in touch and get all that good stuff.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. I'm quite positive you got a ton of gems here. And Fiona, again, thank you so much for your time. I'm lost for words a little bit, but you've been an unbelievable. I thought we'd ever get a chance to talk or meet. So this really is a huge, privilege without being too grovelly, but you absolutely changed my life without a doubt.
You changed your life. And I'm so happy that I inspired you and helped you in some way, but you're the one that took the action and did it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. It's funny. Thank you so much. So this was Matt Anderson and the Road Rarely Taken. And again, I too have some masterminds coming up in the new year. So please drop me a line if those interest you. Otherwise, look forward to presenting again in the near future. Thanks so much.